It's the apocalypse. I don't know if this is the sort of thing that a lot of people are aware of, but the instant that you decide to make a new edition of anything, everything explodes. Sometimes this is for a good reason. Maybe the thing that has been released absolutely bites, and everybody has to know about it. Maybe the thing that's been released has committed no crime greater than just trying to update something beloved in the past, and maybe it's fallen somewhere in between the two. Of course, there's always the specific trouble when you release a new edition but in alpha, a version that's designed very specifically to be released only to people who want to playtest the material and lend their feedback. In fact, in some parlances, alpha doesn't even get outside the studio that makes the product. Alpha simply means that the first time that the whole thing can run. But White Wolf, newly rechristened White Wolf by our friends at Paradox, have decided that they are working on a new Vampire the Masquerade edition, bringing it now to its 6th iteration. And this past weekend at Gen Con, they fully released their playtest materials in person and online. And of course the world exploded. Because they do. That is how it goes. And I'm here to tell you my reactions. And it's the reactions of somebody who has a somewhat of a love-hate relationship with Vampire. Somebody who has a whole bunch of experience with game design, very specifically, and narrative design, and somebody who has taken the time to sit and think and process without buying too much into the reactions that I've seen online so far. Now, I am going to preface this with a few caveats right away. I have not played this playtest, and because I haven't played this playtest, nothing that I say here can be considered definitive, even for my own opinion. My opinion will change, shift, warp once I've actually sat down and played the thing out with a few other people and seen how it reacts, not just from a design perspective, looking at a game design document, but to actually see the thing in practice. The thing that I'll actually remind everybody, first of all, are a couple of things. The first are, the devs are human beings, and while they are trying something and you may disagree with their design sensibilities, obviously that doesn't mean that they are deserving of such vitriol as I'm seeing online. Now, this is kind of a standard thing that everybody says, and everybody kind of knows that if you go on Reddit, you're just looking for the scum of humanity to rise up. But in this particular case, I think it's particularly important to point out that it is an incredible miscarriage of justice to judge this thing before you've played it, but very specifically also then to judge the people who have created it early. Remember that this is an alpha, and that it is not designed to be the final product. They want to see how you react, and once they see how you react, they'll make changes in order to make sure that the game satisfies what they're hoping to accomplish. But of course, the other thing that's very important to remember is that Vampire, the original Vampire the Masquerade, Vampire the Masquerade 2nd Edition, Vampire the Masquerade Revised, Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition, Vampire the Masquerade 5th Edition, Vampire the Requiem 2nd Edition, all of these things still exist, and you can still play them. Edition wars are nothing new. And whenever you get into an edition war, it's always going to be something that people will forget. There's nothing that says that you can't go back and play the earlier editions. And if you prefer the way that those editions run, I freely suggest that you go ahead and do that. There's no requirement to use the last one. It's not even like these other books are going to be taken off the market. They still exist. You can still buy them on DriveThruRPG in their PDF formats. I imagine there's plenty of printings out there if you want to get a hard copy. So that is the thing that I just want everybody to remember when we start. At any rate, so what we're gonna do, I've practiced this jonologue a bit. Nope, I never practice any jonologue. I always come up with them off the top of my head, every single one. Now, Vampire the Masquerade has recently released a sourcebook for Dungeons and Dragons in order to help bring the concept of vampires as we know it from the world of darkness into a more D&D aspect. This is a sign that what Paradox is trying to do is bring awareness of what used to be a major role-playing property back into the fold now that the world is kind of obsessed with D&D. It's important to remember that Dungeons & Dragons is the most popular of the tabletop role-playing games, but it isn't the only one. But it recently experienced a huge resurgence based on actual plays like Critical Role, television shows like Stranger Things, that really got people into it. They've had a feature film recently that was better than their first feature film. I think we could say that. There's already, I can tell, some nervousness surrounding a 6th edition, worried that they're going to dumb this down, that they're going to make this the D&D of Vampire the Masquerade. And I have, after reading a whole bunch of this, come to my own conclusions about my reactions to this text. I asked some questions, or I asked 4 questions for people on Discord, so we're going to be looking at those as well today. What this is not is a step-by-step review of every single part of the player packet and the storyteller packet. I'm not here to explain how the game works for you. This is a reaction video only. At some point, once there's more material, or if we ever decide to do something with this material, I might get further into it. But, so, Alfarius mentions D&D has a walled garden in the form of D&D Beyond that a lot of players never look beyond, so a Vampire the Masquerade, anything in that space is for awareness. 100%. 100%. There is a huge visibility issue that people think role-playing and they think Dungeons & Dragons and that's all they ever look at. And I think that Dungeons & Dragons is a fantastic game, but not the best game for everybody. Visibility is a huge problem here. Vampire, at one time, used to be one of the most popular role-playing games out there. It has since slid. It's still popular, and there's still a lot of people who think of the World of Darkness fondly, Vampire being the most popular of the World of Darkness properties. But it is struggling to maintain its relevance. Now we have an announcement that V6 is on its way, we have the playtest materials in hand, and we even have reassurances that once it's released, the plan is for White Wolf to release a new core every year. Other game lines in the 6th edition, such as Mage, the Ascension, and Changeling the Dreaming, both of which have not seen a 5th edition release. I'm not surprised that this is part of what they're doing. This is an attempt for Paradox to repatriate their most precious game line that they've purchased and then to bring it in-house. I get it. I understand the impetus for this. And I can tell that people are excited by the fact that games that have long waited for something new, Mage and Changeling, are going to perhaps get a little bit of recognition at this point. But nothing is guaranteed. If Vampire doesn't do well, then it's very possible that they'll just crumple up the paper and throw it out, and they just won't even bother with it. Vampire is the kind of game that people have some attachment to, so their chances are pretty good. But Vampire 5th edition was its own breed of controversial in some ways. And the first thing that I'll say about the storyteller and player packet that we have available to us now is that it is surprisingly readable. One of the major issues that I think a lot of people had with Vampire 5th is that the first half of the book is a beautifully presented story with a lot of information told in letters and in investigation folders, photo collages and montages, and it ultimately actually makes for a pretty crappy understanding. The book was not laid out very well, and it was made difficult to read as an artistic choice at the beginning. And this rubbed people the wrong way in a lot of ways. So that's kind of a thing. However, if you look at the player packet now, and I can show you what it looks like, The player packet at the moment has a lot going for it. It is in a PDF format, which is clearly laid out. It has its own bookmarks. It's very easy to navigate throughout. It's easy to read, easy to see. So that's already something that I'm going to say is a plus. But it is also very clearly an alpha. In fact, you can see that at the top right of the screen right now, or the top right of the window, that it is marked as Alpha 1.0, and as a result, it means that it is not fully complete. The narrative hasn't fully entered this. There are terms in here that they say that they're not sure if they're going to keep or not, such as mortal tracker or traits, and there is a lot in here. There's a lot of information. The player packet alone in this PDF, if we go through the whole thing, is actually sitting at, let's see, 178 pages. That's pretty good. 178 pages, and then the storyteller packet that accompanies it is another 46. Both of them have some copy between the two of them that are equal, mostly outlining what the playtest goals are, the game design and the playtest design, so that people are aware of that if they're looking at the packet. But that is a lot of information that is thrown in there. And this is something that I want people to recognize as a show of faith in the product. Now, my experience with Vampire the Masquerade started in LARP play. This was over 25 years ago, where I first started playing Vampire, as I was invited to participate in a regular ongoing LARP here in Montreal that had already been going for a few years. At first I was a guest NPC, then I created my own PC and started playing, and I did this for a few years. I've participated in Vampire tabletop campaigns, other Vampire LARPs. I will say that it is, out of the game lines that I've played from the World of Darkness, which are your major ones, it is probably my least favorite from a conceptual point of view, but it often is the one that runs the best based on the fact that there are so many people who know it and love it. But I prefer Mage, I prefer Werewolf, and I prefer Changeling over Vampire. That doesn't mean I don't like Vampire, but it does mean that its themes were ones that didn't resonate with me as much. When I play a game, I struggled a little bit sometimes with fully buying into the somewhat nihilistic worldview that the Vampire the Masquerade game sort of adopted. The idea that you were inevitably going to slide into your beast, that you were, that you basically had very little emotional awareness, very little other than a lust for power or lust for domination, which was made in some supplements. Others changed that. It was only around Vampire 5th edition that the game started really truly acknowledging the concept that vampires might still be able to love in the same ways that mortals do. But here is where I am interested in Vampire 6th, because I'm looking at this from two perspectives. One, somebody who used to play Vampire and is interested to see how Vampire has changed. And two, somebody who's very interested in game systems, TTRPG systems, especially since the core of this system may end up laying the foundation for game lines with systems that in the past I have been frustrated with and have really hoped for an update, specifically Mage and Changeling. Werewolf 5th edition was one that I adored in terms of its system, which I know can be a somewhat controversial take. But having run a 100 plus game campaign in Werewolf, I can say that I think Werewolf 5th edition is the edition that I would teach anybody new to the genre. I think it is the one that people should be looking out for. And that kind of leads me into my major point with this playtest. And I'm going to get this out of the way right off here, right at the beginning, because it's going to color a lot of what I'm going to go into and what I'm going to say when it comes to the individual bits. And that is, I understand why people are reacting so negatively to this playtest. And I think that for many of you, not all of you, but many of you, are seeing this from the lens of your beloved games or your beloved characters. You look at your character as it exists today. Think, this is a character with many of the same dots on the sheet. A lot of these terms are the same. Strength, dexterity, stamina. My disciplines have the same names. Animalism, potence, celerity. And yet now I look at this new edition and my character just feels off. Weird. I don't think that this character would be the same in this new game. I don't think that they'd feel the same. I think it would feel weird and odd and different. Because my character will feel weird and odd and different, I don't like it, and I get it. When we were playing Exalted 3rd Edition, back when we were doing Exalted Academy, we switched halfway through from Exalted 3rd Edition to Exalted Essence, specifically the manuscript for Exalted Essence. And something that happened, a lesson that I picked up on, that I kind of already had known but thought that it couldn't apply here, and it did. And that is that the characters, having their abilities change, having the rules change behind them, made them feel different, strange. And even though you're ostensibly supposed to be able to port these characters over, they're not the same characters in the end. They come out changed. And changed in ways that not just affect how you're going to pick up your math rocks and throw them onto the table, but also how these characters play. Their abilities make a large part of that role-playing experience. And because Essence had shifted how these abilities were expressed and how these abilities were used, the characters no longer felt the same. We struggled through. We finished the campaign. But universally, we agreed that the port from 3rd Edition Essence felt awful. And so, I think that when a lot of people look at the rules here and they see how the game has changed from a systems perspective, they're thinking of it in terms of their old characters. They're thinking of them in terms of their old stories and how those stories would not be possible with this new system. And I agree with you. Those stories are not possible. Those stories were created based on the rules that you were using, whether they're the ones in the book or ones that you had house ruled or a combination of the two. And when you introduce a new rule set, the world changes. It has to. Sure, there's elements of the meta plot that can stretch from one to the next to the next to the next. The meta plot is largely written without actually using the role-playing systems, which is why sometimes you'll get some ludonarrative dissonance happening here. But I would venture to say that you need to open yourself up to new stories if you're looking at a new system. Does that system meet expectations? Does that new system give you the tools that you need to play a satisfying game that still feels like Vampire the Masquerade and yet has its updates, has its tweaks, has its changes, has its abilities to make you feel or not? Let's dive into it. All right. So, there's a few questions in terms of the meta-narrative right off the bat. And a lot of that is the idea is that, are we resetting? Is this the Ryan Johnson or the J.J. Abrams of Vampire? Are we introducing this concept because Vampire 5th made some major changes to how the stories play out, and then this one comes in and basically says that a lot of the interesting ideas that came out of Vampire 5th edition no longer apply? Some of this is systems and some of this is actually narrative. The idea that the elders in 5th edition were depowered, and here they're not. In fact, 6th edition does a very good job of stating that while it's not ready yet, the game is designed to be playable for neonates and Scylli and elders, alongside Duskbloods, alongside ghouls, which is a pretty wide base. It says that it's able to be played by Camarilla vampires, Sabbat vampires, independents, anarchs, affiliated, KTIF. All of that will be playable through the core. This is great because another thing that Vampire 5th did was that it essentially said if you're not playing a Camarilla vampire, we don't even have the rules for you yet. You can't. And that frustrates players who are used to being able to play all of the vampires from the start. So that makes a difference. I forget if it's Duskblood. Let me check here. Duskborn. It's Duskborn. Duskborn is a vampire of the 14th or 15th generation who doesn't experience the curse of Cain the way others of its kind do. So they're known as Duskborn now. I think that this packet, as you say, Kung Fu Fenders, is absolutely not going to be containing all of the rules that we have here. For one thing, many of the clans are not detailed and many of the disciplines aren't, so we already know that those are on their way. But I also imagine that they're going to be making changes based on this playtest. If they weren't intending to get feedback from the playtest, they wouldn't have released it. There are also strategies that sometimes companies do where they will release a playtest knowing that there are things that they will revert in a way to sort of win over the idea that this is something new, but then to extend an olive branch to the old generation to say, hey, returning players, we listened to you and we're bringing back some of your favorites, when in fact there may have never really been a serious attempt to make those changes at all. And there are certain things in here that I think are probably going to revert. I have a small list of things that I'm pretty close to, but we'll see. Kung Fu Fenris, a writer for Werewolf 5th edition and somebody who has been a member of our community since all the way back when, has had some pretty visible reactions to this, and I completely understand. And I do want to make it clear that even if I disagree with some of these or agree with some of these, it doesn't invalidate your own feelings on this, right? So, I appreciate that, Gwen. Your barely on topic commentary is still always appreciated. So, I don't think that this is a very bad, terrible thing. I think that there are a lot of interesting ideas in here that I would want to play, that I want to try at the very least. And that's a bit... I mean, yeah, KFF, absolutely, yeah, it is branding. I do think that there's stuff in here that is interesting. I think that there's some things in here that definitely involve a seismic shift in how we think about tests. And when it comes to that, what you really need then is buy-in from everybody. As a system change, there's a couple of things that we're going to throw out right off the bat. The first is difficulty is now subtracted as dice from your dice pool. So dice pools are formed the same way that they are in pretty much every storyteller system game out there. One attribute, one ability, you collect the number of dice and you roll. But in this case, instead of trying to meet a certain difficulty number that can change, such as in Revised Edition, or instead of it being the target number is always the same and you need to roll a certain number of successes, in this particular case, they have changed it so that difficulty is always just dice that are taken out of your pool. So if your pool is 5 and you're doing a difficulty 2 task, you roll 3 dice. Every die that comes in an 8, a 9, or a 10 is a success. If you score 1 success, it is a success. In previous games of World of Darkness or Storyteller system games, 1 success is considered like a meager success. It is considered a bare success. 3 successes was more of a solid success. But in this system, it's 1. You need 1. And the more successes you get on top of that 1, the better a result you could potentially get, whether it's because you're in combat and you get to do some more damage, or because you are in a social or mental test and therefore you get to get a bit more information than you would have normally. So I don't actually mind this as long as they do a very good job of communicating that change and sticking to it. And when I say sticking to it, I mean I don't want to see any playtest materials thrown out there or any other material at all that starts insisting that players need to have more than one success, because you don't. The whole point of this system is to make sure that if you get one success, you have succeeded. You're trying to climb a building, you roll, you get one success, you are at the top of that building. You did it. The difficulty has already been taken into account by removing the dice from your pool. So that's already something that I would point out. I'm worried about the fact that there's a lot of legacy in here, a lot of long-term gamers who've played this for whom one success will feel bad. It'll feel bad. And I don't want it to. I don't want it to feel badly. They're not ditching degrees of success, Eremetheus. They're recalibrating them. So let's call that up so that we can see what it looks like. Because I think this is important for us to be clear. So, to make a test, it's attribute plus skill minus difficulty, as it says here, but what it does have is extra successes. So in some situations, such as conflicts, the number of successes you roll changes how effective you are. You might deal more damage with an attack or learn more than you set out to find. So it is still degrees of success. The difference is that now it's not one success is barely a success and kind of not really, and 3 successes is a full success, and 5 successes is a critical success. Now, 1 success is a success. You did it. And the more successes you get on top of that, the better it can potentially get. So I like this in certain ways, if only that. I think that the number of rolls that people have to make in order to achieve an outcome, the fewer the better to a certain degree. And saying, look, your difficulty isn't something that you're going to have to worry about, because it's a little bit janky sometimes, especially for newer players, to see your difficulty is 4. And what that means is I need you to roll at least 4 successes. Well, it's a bit strange, because if I've got 3 successes, didn't that mean I succeed? Well, in this case, no. You didn't. You needed 4. That's how it currently runs in 5th edition. Now, it is something a bit different. But it also feels differently, because now, if there's only 3 out of 10 faces on a 10-sided die that gives you a success, that means that if you're only rolling 1 die, you have about a 1 in 3, a little less than 1 in 3 chance of succeeding. If you have 2 dice, it gets a bit better. But understanding that probability is not something that swims around in people's heads all that easily, because it's a fundamental shift from how we've seen difficulty presented in previous World of Darkness games, where many successes tended to be the norm, the rule. So I think that some people are going to pick these dice up, do the new rules, and then feel bad because they're used to being able to roll many dice, and they're used to being able to say, I have successes. Because here's something else. There is no willpower mechanic that lets you have an automatic success any longer. Not that that's been present in 5th. 5th, spending a point of willpower lets you pick up 3 dice and roll them again. That mechanic isn't there. Willpower is now strictly a resource that indicates your mental health, your social health. And in social or mental conflicts, the willpower is what goes up and down. It is not, however, something that you can spend. There's a different currency for that, known as quickening, and we'll get to that in a second. So, Eremetheus, you've nailed something that I think is absolutely true. The idea of taking dice away can make things feel less fun. Even though a lot of systems kind of already did this, the idea being that like there are penalties that would increase difficulty, but that there are also penalties that would take dice out of your pool, like wound penalties, for instance. Now we see it more along the lines of, okay, but maybe rolling 2 dice is going to be pretty normal. And it feels a bit weird if you're like, but I'm a super fucking buff vampire who's been around for 300 years. I have a strength of 5 and I have a fighting. We'll get to that later. A fighting of 5, so I have 10 dice in my pool. Look at this. I have all of these dice ready to roll. And then you say, yeah, but your difficulty is 8. You rolled 2. But I had a pool of 10. And now I have 2 measly dice to roll? Now I just succeeded with that. Sorry, no I didn't. No, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong die. I rolled 2 dice, and in fact I botched. Although they don't call them botches anymore, which they call them painful failures, which just call them botches. But anyway. The rules for setting difficulty are in the Storyteller packet, but they are somewhat easy to understand. The issue, though, is that this is a rough situation to find yourself in when you are facing down a massive challenge, right? Like I'll call up the difficulty chart, actually, in here, so that you can see it. Where is the difficulty? Difficulty. So, difficulty by circumstances. You can see the difficulty can range from 1 to 10, with 10 being actions that challenge even the most competent individuals in the field. This is possibly the highest level of difficulty a mortal is able to succeed on. Even most elder vampires will falter when faced with such a challenge. So that's a bit strange. The 10 means that if you have a pool of 10 and that you're facing a difficulty of, say, like 8, right? Severe, as it's marked in here. 8 should be something that no starting character should ever encounter. Or if they are encountering it, it's with the knowledge that they aren't going to have a die pool. So if I have a pool of 10, I'm coming in against a difficulty of 8 and I'm rolling 2 dice, is that going to make me feel good? Because at a certain point, most of my challenges are going to have to be higher if I'm in a higher tier of play. The tiers of play are something that are announced in this package as well, that if you're a neonate, your tier of play is 1. If you're an ancillate, it's 2. If you're an elder, it's 3. And that average difficulties change based on that, along with the NPC levels. What they've done here is they've tried to make it so that the game itself has a bit of an easier job of trying to tell you what kind of threats you should be up against based on a few things. But it's a bit strange, in my opinion, because they even say at the very end of the book, don't worry too much about the balance of encounters. There are no fair fights in the world of darkness. Sometimes the PCs will face enemies they can defeat with little effort, while other times they will face enemies too powerful to engage directly. So they've gone to a lot of effort of making sure that there are levels now, both for player characters and for NPCs, although they're not levels like D&D class levels. And yet, they also say, sometimes things are just not going to be balanced one way or the other, and that's it. So Eremetheus, excuse me, Eremetheus, when you say, if average difficulties go up with character advancement, you won't viscerally feel that difference. So part of it is that they don't make it clear when you advance to the next tier of play, because your age is what indicates it, not your experience level. And it's a bit tricky. They don't say whether or not you actually change that. The thing that really makes me sort of remind people of this is that this happens in video games all the time. The way that you make people feel strong is you give them a gradually increasing curve of difficulty, but that you also make sure that you have spikes in power gain and then in difficulty. So I'm wandering through and I'm doing 1 damage to every enemy, and every enemy takes 2 hits to kill. So they all have 2 HP. And then at one point, now there are enemies that take 3 hits to kill, and I'm like, oh, these are getting tougher. But then I find a new sword, and this sword does 2 HP worth of damage. Well, now all the enemies that took 2 hits to kill only take 1. And the enemies that took 3 hits to kill take 2. But then I introduce an enemy that is 5 HP. Well, okay, now it takes me 3 hits to kill that one. But then I find a new sword, and then the sword makes me stronger again. But the point is, you have to give the player the feeling that you are progressing by putting in lower threats that now are much easier to dispatch, and harder threats that at one time would have been impossible for you to dispatch, and now is possible, but now difficult. Because you still want to get to the point at the end of the game where somebody feels like they've been challenged despite all the progression that they've had, and that progression was necessary, or necessary at least for people who aren't speedrunners, to make it to the end, right? I became strong, therefore I could defeat the enemy, but also I as a player became strong because I learned the patterns, I learned the controls, I learned the strategy. That's basic game design. So in a game like D&D, this is an easy way to say this is if you put one single orc in front of, or maybe not an orc, that's a bad example because they can be player character races. At any rate, let's say we'll put one kobold, a standard kobold, first level kobold in front of a 20th level fighter, and that fighter is just going to go back, and the kobold is going to just disintegrate, right? But put that 20th level fighter up against a Tarrasque, and then all of a sudden things change. This exists here, but it's being presented in a way that I find a bit clunky. Because I think that it is being presented with the concept of levels, that people are starting to see what isn't actually there. What they've done is they've said that NPCs are now different levels, and therefore when you are testing against these NPCs, you're basically, the difficulty is that NPC's level, and that's it. That's the whole kit and caboodle. It streamlines the game, but it also narrows its focus. And I will say, in my style of game, that's not a problem for me. I don't mind that things feel samesies. Especially because when you're creating an NPC, what you're also doing is giving them special abilities. So special abilities can do things like, once per scene, the NPC can use its action to throw a Molotov, and therefore now they have to dodge it or catch fire. Or rage bait. They insult and ridicule a target, and so therefore if you succeed on a social attack, now this person gets -1 penalties on tests to resist rage frenzy. So there are ways to make it so that it isn't just always hit the same difficulty. But I like the fact that at this point, if my players decide that they're going to attack somebody who I didn't have a sheet statted out for it, I can make it incredibly easy to do. And even more easy than, like, say, quick characters in Exalted, or coming up with like those stat blocks that you'd see at the end of books and antagonist chapters and things like V5 and W5. Now, at this point, I'm just like, this guy's level 2. So it's level 2. And that helps. But then it's level 2, and I can also check and change things with the stuff that I see here in the special abilities. Or I can make up my own special abilities. But that also gets into one other thing about the system that has a major change that I think a lot of people have to get used to. Storyteller, at the moment, is not required to roll at all. Now, in the Storyteller packet, it does make it clear that there are times where, yes, you can roll as the Storyteller. It gives you reasons to roll, whether you're doing it as an NPC, in which case you're usually using a pool that's twice their level, or you can even stat out a character and roll as if it was a PC. That is a way to do it. And in this case, it means that when I'm playing against, say, my normal group, when I attack them, they just roll their dodge. I don't roll to attack. There's no point. There's no reason to. They just roll their dodge, and if they succeed, they dodge it, and if they fail, they'll take a certain amount of damage based on the character's level and the weapon that they're using. That's it. Which means that now, instead of dice being something that I have to roll and the player has to roll, now just the player rolls it. And it means that all the rolls are open. I can't fudge a die roll that I'm not touching. I can't lie about the dice that fall. Not that I do, but I know that a lot of people do. You'll roll dice and you'll make the decision based on vibes. And now you can't anymore because the dice are in the player's hands, not the storyteller's. And that's different. And I like the concept of it. One of the things that we're doing right now, we're playing Exalted 3rd Edition again, and Exalted 3rd Edition is a wonderful game. I love the universe. I love the different powers that are there. The powers feel so cool to use, and they have wide-ranging applications, and there's so many different kinds that like your character can really build themselves out. But combat's a beast in that system. It's a major thing. Have you seen the Exalted 3rd Edition flowchart? It's massive. And for people who aren't used to it, it can take a while to run. It can take a long while to run. And it can be intimidating, both for the storyteller and for the players. When we were playing W5, combat was much easier. I rolled, you rolled, whoever got more successes wins. And I liked that system. I still do like that system. And that's part of the reason why I would find it difficult, for instance, to play Changeling the Dreaming today. Because Changeling, every combat action was 4 sequential rolls. Attack, defense, damage, soak. But you had to do those 4 rolls for every character every round, whether they were a PC or an NPC. Now I can say, I'm attacking you, and players don't have to ask questions, they just have to pick up their dodge. They reduce the difficulty based on what I said that enemy was. This is a difficulty 2 enemy. So they say, great, normally I have 6 dice to dodge, now I only have 4, I roll, I botched. So, Essence is a level of crunch that is still over what I would say W5 is, for instance. I think it's a little less than 3rd, but it is still significantly more complicated than people tend to think. It's just it's streamlined in other ways. There's only 3 attributes, right? There's only Force, Finesse, and Fortitude. That's all they have, instead of 9. So, yeah, botches. Yeah, you have to have a minor PhD in quick characters to make stuff in Exalted 3rd Edition. Absolutely. But in this case, I can see that there's an advantage here in that now, if somebody gets into combat, I can say go right ahead. It's still, I think that it's still something that I'd have to play with, that I have to see if I enjoy it. But I don't think that this is taking a lot out of my hands if I don't have dice to roll. Instead, what we're doing is essentially saying, players, you are getting to see directly what the results are. Right off the bat, right off your roll alone. There's no what success did you get versus what success did I get? That doesn't exist anymore. We're not rolling off. Now, when you roll, you're going to know right away what the result is because it's right there on the page. So that's something that I think people would have to try and see if it worked out for them. I imagine that this is something that that we're going to have to get used to. This might be something that we are going to have to see as part of 6th edition because it is something that makes the game more similar. In terms of the playtest goals, they don't specifically ask for information about how dice are rolled. Playtest focuses on humanity scale, monstrous and mortal trackers, frenzy and outburst rules, character creation, character advancement, discipline powers, and clan traits. That's what they're looking at. It is not about the mechanics of the dice rolls. So it feels like that's what they've decided on. Now, I'm not saying that that means that they're going to ignore comments about those sorts of things, but I think that that's what it is. Which specifically annoys the ever-loving shit out of you, KFF? And also, I know, Aragorn, you said also at one point, where was it? I didn't like it. Yeah, I just want to know what you didn't like. Not wanting dice feedback. So they... Specifically for the goals in this one, they didn't ask for that. That doesn't mean that they won't ask for it in the future. When we run betas and alphas, we often are testing for one particular thing at the moment. If you try to change too many things all at once, then your systems are built on a foundation of sand. Changing a few variables or a very limited number of variables is much more effective than changing all of them. So it wouldn't surprise me if they might come out later on and say, okay, well, now we've sort of got down what we're trying to do with disciplines and with clan traits. Now we want to know about the system itself. Yeah, no, I didn't like Essence, Aragorn. The only reason we were debating Essence at one point is because it has one advantage it makes for multi-splat play. It's kind of already balanced for that. But since that's not what we were doing, we decided for third. Mage is so that Lydia, they have confirmed that Mage and Changeling will not see a 5th edition release. They've confirmed that it is a known thing. If they have said that they are planning, or it is in their planning, right? Like nothing is guaranteed, but they are hoping to release Mage and Changeling as the following game lines, alongside Dark Ages Vampire. So Werewolf is currently not slated for a 6th edition. Hunter is currently not slated for 6th edition, but they are still releasing 5th edition stuff for those game lines. And then once Mage and Changeling have had their turn, I imagine then they might turn their eye and see what they can do about Werewolf. Or about Hunter. Yeah, so what Kate has put in there is extremely subject to change. They have said that the order is something that they are not finalized on at all. And I would imagine that they might try to figure it out based on what can we actually make do with these things. Mage suffers from a couple of problems. Even though it's a beloved game line, it is very complicated to resolve effects in those particular ways, and it can chase a lot of players away. So they might be trying to figure out a way to make that a much less of a pain. Changeling is one of those game lines that was never as popular as the others, but it also has a rabid fan base. People who love Changeling really love Changeling, and they will absolutely adopt whatever they can get out of it. But Changeling is also something that is running up against one of the issues that Werewolf ran up against alongside Mage, that all of the game lines are somewhat subject to this, which is some cultural questions. The thing about Changeling, though, is that it's very difficult to just take culture out of Changeling without fundamentally changing the entire thing, because that's based on folklore, and folklore is based on culture. So there's some question marks there. Yeah. This is something else that I want to throw out there, and I know that some of it is an emotional reaction, and so I understand it, and I don't blame anybody for it, but it's something that I think bears noting. As Kate is saying, there's zero way that they've released this playtest without them having playtested it. There's zero ways that they haven't done it themselves with their own internal playtest groups, or even their own external playtest groups that were let in early. Nobody is going to release material like this on a whim and just be like, yeah, I'm just going by vibes. Not at this level. Not at this level of game design, at this level of publishing. And there's a lot of people online who are just like, well, this is stupid. It has to be stupid. This would never work. And I would venture to say that that's not a fair way of talking, because they wouldn't have released it if it didn't work for them. Now, does it work the best? Is it the best option? Is it something that appeals to the most players? That's a question mark. But I'll also remind you that they're not necessarily going for something that everybody loves. They want to go for things that will bring new players into the game. And a lot of people have difficulty with that. Rightfully so. We don't want to feel like we're aging out. We don't want to feel like we're no longer relevant. But in the same vein that they'll make television, they'll make movies and stuff like that, and they'll think, what's our demographic? A lot of game companies these days, Wizards of the Coast, White Wolf, Paizo, they are looking at things and saying, we need to draw new players in, not only focus on the ones that we have. Because if you're only focused on the group that you have, you can't grow. You can only shrink. And so therefore, they want to make sure that players who are up with the new wave, the new times, new games, they want to make sure that those players feel welcome in here. And so they are going to make changes that some people are going to hate. Not all change is bad. I'm unseelie that way. I think change is good. I'm the kind of person who, when you announce a new thing, I want to try it. I want to get my hands in it. I want to see how it feels. I want to update my thinking and my feeling. But I will admit that there's some changes in here that I don't think are fantastic. So KFF, I don't think that's such a big assumption. I think you're correct. The reason why a lot of people are buckling is in the increased granularity in non-traditional mechanics plus the highly technical language. This is, in fact, very much an alpha playtest. This has not been smoothed over by a copywriter. This is something that is straight up like, boom, here are the rules. Let's do it. Rules. And that can be complicated. It can be difficult. But like, it's impossible to judge it in a vacuum, because it's still pulling from old games and it still wants old players to come and play. So at any rate, let me just check my notes here, because we've been kind of bouncing around talking about a bunch of things, which is great, but I want to make sure that we cover things. So, Osab mentioned on the Discord, they appear to have been inspired by key systems from a number of newer games. Which ones am I excited to see in a vampire game? Are there any of those that I think that might be a poor fit? And did they miss any systems that I think would have been a great addition? We haven't even talked about the metacurrencies yet, so we'll get to that in a second. I will say that this feels very different. This feels much more different of a shift than even perhaps 5th edition felt to 20th anniversary. And I know that a lot of people liked a bunch of the stuff from 5th edition, like Hunger Dice. I loved Rage Dice. I thought Rage Dice felt really good in Werewolf, and I absolutely adored it. But I don't think because I like something is a good enough reason to say, and therefore it must always be there. I would say I need to test the other things and see if I like the overall. In terms of what I'm excited to see, as key systems here. I'm excited to see how it plays out where players are doing most of the roles. I want to see if that makes sure that the players don't feel all samesies. I want to see how much easier it is for storytellers. Because if there's one thing that I think a lot of game companies have realized, it's that the major barrier to entry for a lot of people is not finding a group, it's finding somebody to run the game. And running games, for a lot of people, is hard. Because you're being asked to not only craft the skeleton of the narrative and to play all the other characters, but you're also the arbiter. You're the referee. You're the one who has to understand the rules and adjudicate them. People look to you for guidance. You are the leader of the group in some cases, in many cases. And the harder it is to be a storyteller, the more you're not going to want to do it. And without storytellers, without DMs, without GMs, there is no game. So, this ends up being a problem. The way the Wizards of the Coast is solving it? Regenerated adventures. These are very, very popular. Hey, we'll give you the maps, we'll give you the basic outlines of the story, we'll tell you how to do it, we'll give you the characters that you're going to encounter, the NPCs that you're going to have to fight, go for it. That's one way to do it. You're basically saying to the storyteller, you are running this game, but we are hand-holding you. World of Darkness has traditionally been difficult for storytellers because of the balance of the game. Because the game very much is like, yeah, you can make a social character, you can make a mental character, you can make a physical character, you can make an all-rounder, you can make characters that are very good in very specific circumstances and not in others, and how do you balance an encounter like that? And the game basically said, fuck it, you figure it out. They didn't give you anything. Right? There were, in books like the ones that are behind me, there aren't things that are like, for a party of this number of players, you want to make sure that you are facing off against this kind of character who has this many stats. Like, they just don't. They just don't. Now, one of the things that I'll point out in terms of Hunger Dice, which I'll point out means that maybe you shouldn't be listening to me at all, is that one of the reasons why I don't like Vampire is that I find feeding to be annoying. In much the same way that I don't really particularly care about how you get your glamour in Changeling. Like, I think that it's thematically interesting. I think that it's cool that, like, you have to find somebody who has blood and you have to take it from them. You have to decide, are you going to take a little bit and therefore have to find multiple people? Are you going to take a lot and put that person in the hospital? Are you going to kill them and risk that to your humanity? Are you going to feed off animals, which doesn't taste as good, doesn't satisfy the hunger, and also makes you look like kind of a wuss in front of other vampires? Are you going to be a blood banker and start just taking bagged blood and also disappoint a whole lot of vampires who snicker at you behind your back? Like, there's a lot of questions surrounding that I think are cool. And then somebody says, okay, now you have to feed. And I'm just like, well, I don't fucking care. In much the same way that I don't ask, hey, where's your next meal coming from in most games? I just don't. I just find it so inane. Yeah, as a vampire, you're eventually going to have to find somebody and you're going to have to feed off them. It's only interesting when it's difficult. It's only interesting when the supply is taken away from you. In Changeling, a lot of times these chronicles kind of come down to like, well, get a hold of a freehold so that you get that constant drip of glamour and just call it. Because musing is something that takes weeks or months to regain just a little bit of glamour. Ravaging, you know, like that's faster, sure, but it's just the game kind of grinds to a halt in some ways when it's like, how do you get your next resource? How do you pull out the, like, werewolf with no gnosis? Fucking, I love the fact that no, I don't have to worry about like players tracking yet another resource and having a very difficult time of getting it. Like, great, that's no problem. Mage, quintessence. Okay, but quintessence never seemed as much of a problem because also it wasn't necessary in a lot of cases, but like Dross hunting, like fucking it's just frustrating to put so much effort into this. And one of the things that V5 did that I also didn't like that much, because thematically it was cool, but mechanically, was like blood resonance. The idea that like, oh, depending on who you feed on, it might be good or bad for other things. Like if you piss somebody off and then you feed off them, oh, you got some rage in you. But like, who cares? It's a resource that you're getting. It's collecting gold off the ground after you hit a monster, you know, like watch number go up, move on. It's only interesting occasionally. It's only interesting thematically. And then eventually it becomes something that I want to skip over all the time. And this is one of the things that I have an issue with Vampire as a whole, is that sometimes, and including in the alpha playtest here, there's a lot of emphasis on the idea that like, you're gonna have to feed. How are you gonna feed? And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I just don't. I don't care. You know, feeding is interesting for Ventru. Oh man, I only can suck blood from left-handed Lithuanian plumbers. Okay, well now you have to find left-handed Lithuanian plumbers. That's at least somewhat more interesting than some other guy who's just like, I'll just go into an alley. There must be somebody there. Or I'll go to a rave. And then I'll just like kiss somebody on the neck and they'll be like, woo. And I'll be like, yeah. And then leave. Like, ugh. Yeah, for raising disciplines. But it was just like, bleh. Because they also put it in a bunch of the video games too, and I was just like, I don't want to care about any of this. So, what you mentioned, the fact that it is the parasitic core, like the narrative core of vampirism, it is at the narrative core, but when you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, how many times did you watch a vampire actually feed from somebody and it was important, right? Not actually that many. It wasn't actually that important. You didn't need to see it most of the time. Yeah. See, like, doing a start of day dice roll to see how successful you are, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Buffy's a hunter show, yes, KFF. But the thing is, the vampires were scary. Once you'd seen them feed once or twice, that's all you needed to know about them. You didn't need to see it again and again and again. And I think that if you want to run a game that focuses on prey management and all that, more power to you. But it is one of the things that made me kind of get frustrated with some games of Vampire. Like if you're playing in a LARP, I want to be interacting with the other players. I want to be talking to them. I want to be scheming. I want to be counter scheming. I want to be fighting in an alleyway. I want to see a whole bunch of storytellers run into a room with their hands above their head and for me to be like, oh fuck, the lupines are here. And I don't want to be thinking about like, well, I just need to go outside and I need to find somebody. And then I'm going to have to roll seduction on them so that they'll come with me. And then I'm going to take them back to my house. But it isn't actually my house because I actually have to sleep in some fucking basement somewhere because if the sun touches me, I die. So they come into the house and then I'm going to use Blush of Life in order to make sure that my dick can get hard. And then they're going to see my dick get hard and that'll be cool. But then I'll actually just drain them for some blood and then leave them on the road. Like, ah! I don't care. Fuck. But this is me in Vampire. God, the number of times that like people in LARP were like, let's keep track of how often we have to use Blush of Life. Oh, and we're gonna have sex, except that back in the day, sex between vampires was largely just like a mild amusement for them, and they didn't actually have the depth of feeling in their hearts because that part of them was dead. But of course that was LARP, and people just wanted an excuse to get touchy-feely with each other outside of their relationships. Anyway. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, Osab, but I think that these systems need to be in there, but I think there's too many of them, and I think there's too much exaggeration of them. Alfarius asked... Oh yeah, I yell at clouds and LARPers alike. Fuck it. I've seen more than one person complain that this playtest is D&D-ifying the game because there's combat reactions now, or is this the usual new update grind of Vampire the Masquerade players complaining about everything new that's actually mechanical underpinnings as being the baleful influence of malevolent outside actors? I can pull up people who I guarantee are complaining that they're no longer Hunger Dice now, and they were complaining when Hunger Dice were first released. The sheer vitriol about Hunger Dice was a huge problem. What do you mean, maybe sometimes my disciplines don't reduce my blood count? Well, that's fucking stupid. Well, what do you mean that hunger is now kind of just like a nebulous concept of 1 to 5 and I can't keep track of it right away? What do you mean that some disciplines work sometimes and sometimes they don't, and that's sort of done? It was full of it. People were shouting at this, and now people are treating it like that you're taking away their fucking favorite toy. You're not. You're just doing something different. The fact that there's combat reactions, no, I am completely fine with this. What's your wits? Okay, that's the number of times you get to defend against opponents before somebody just fucking clocks you. That actually kind of makes some sense. Now, I'd have to see how it plays. I'd have to see how the balance works for this. But if I'm a vampire and I'm surrounded by 7 people and I can't pull off some like mass area of attack move or area of social attack move, then yeah, they should be able to get in on me. There's no way that I can defend like that. This game isn't fucking John Wick. So it's like, yikes. Hey, Requiem. It's good to see you. I don't mind about reactions that way. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that you can also just temper your expectations, right? Like, if a vampire is being approached by 12 people with bats, first of all, I would argue you can't actually have 12 people surround one person and hit them effectively. But then also, just run. Like, I think that there's sometimes also a certain mindset from people that they're like, my vampire is basically a god, and I shouldn't be able to go up against like 5 mortals and lose. And you know what? I think a neonate vampire could easily lose to 5 mortals who are wielding baseball bats. There's a reason why vampires don't run the entire world openly, because humanity is actually stronger than vampires, because there's just a hell of a lot more of them. I think that sometimes people have to accept that you can't always win every goddamn situation. So, there's that. Celerity. Celerity, look, the fact that the rules in here states that celerity can give you 2 actions around, I'm already like, huh, because that's incredibly powerful. But then you have to spend 3 vitae to do it, and you have to spend willpower every round afterwards in order to maintain it. Otherwise, you're spending 3 vitae again. And remember, if you're spending vitae, that's also your health. So, in Vampire's previous editions, if you got injured, you healed yourself by spending blood. Well, now, they've taken that part out of it. You get injured, it's just taking away the amount of blood that you have access to. You want to use your disciplines that require the use of blood? You are actually taking damage off of it. And I don't actually really mind that either. Not really. I think that there are ways to balance the disciplines in order to make sure that the costs make sense. I think that it's really important to say that if you want a super cool discipline, you're going to have to spend a bunch of blood, and that does make you a bit more vulnerable. If you haven't fed recently, you don't get to play with your disciplines all the goddamn time. I think that makes some sense. Avatar of Cain, I'm not sure what you're referring to. In your weight, really, but... non-vampire characters have health. They just have health. I don't know if they still call it vitae. So Eremetheus, willpower is still something that you can spend. So disciplines cost you either vitae or they cost you willpower. But if you're making a social attack against somebody, it drains their willpower. So it's still the same there. All right, let's talk metacurrency. I know that I'm bouncing around a whole lot, but we got a fast-moving chat. So, Metacurrency. I'd be very curious to know your thoughts on GM versus player metacurrencies in general and in the case of Vampire 6th Edition, if they're different. Thank you, Omnic. So, quickening. I don't like the name, but quickening. This is something where I think a lot of people are, where not a lot of people. Let's put the blame where I think it belongs. I think that the player packet doesn't do enough to remind players that for difficult things, using quickening is going to be important. Now, quickening is a resource that you gain because you are hungry, because you have succeeded. You get a quickening every time you roll a 0 or a 10, I should say. Yeah, multi-action celerity, I am very fucking worried. The instant that you allow someone to take more than one action in a turn, I get very nervous. So, yeah, there are unofficial M5 rules. There's also unofficial C5 rules. Neither of them are ones that I think are fantastic, but I admit I haven't played them. So quickening is the sort of thing that you hold, but now, instead of spending willpower to gain successes or to gain extra dice, now you spend your quickening. You can spend quickening to gain extra dice on a pool. You can spend quickening to help another player gain extra dice on a pool. You can also take actions to help them, but you can just spend quickening as long as you can see or hear them and just go, there you go. And then they can make use of that. You can spend 3 quickening and you get a success. Just, you win. You automatically win. It's like spending willpower in older editions, right? Like you got 1 success, except in this case, it's more powerful because 1 success is often all you need. You can even do this in combat. You can spend 3 quickening and you get to hit somebody. Boom, done. No questions asked. You will hit them. You will do damage. So, that helps. Yes, all vampires, yeah, VPreg is now canon. You can spend 5 quickening and then you get to succeed on something that you don't even have any skill points in. You want to stabilize somebody, you're not a doctor, spend 5 quickening, boom, they're still alive. I'm not actually that against it. I think that I appreciate the fact that quickening is not tied to making the storyteller happy. I think that there are certain systems and mechanics for which that's okay, but I'm not convinced that it's necessarily the best thing. Stunting, for instance. I like stunts in Exalted. I like the fact that it encourages people to describe things cool, but the problem is that stunting is also something that a bunch of people would find quite difficult. And therefore you're saying your character cannot be as effective because you can't stunt as well. So there's that. But quickening is just like, hey, did you roll a 10? Great. Did you start the scene with very little blood? Well, great, you've got more quickening because now you're being driven to act. I don't like the name, and I don't see I don't like the way that they're trying to put ludonarrative links in here. Like saying things like, oh, well, if you're hungry, then you get to be better at things. I don't, like, they're saying, like, it's the beast inside you that's stirring you to act. Like, well, then what the fuck? Like, why do you also get it if you roll a 10? I also don't like the fact that it builds on your successes. So if I roll well and I get a bunch of 10s, then I get to continue succeeding. If I fail, I don't get it. Unless you know you're going to fail because you don't have a pool and you just accept it. Yes, Kate, you can just use candy for your quickening, which you eat when you spend it. So I'm not super thrilled with that. Drama. This is the hardest part for me to figure out. This is where I run into some issues. Drama is, it feels very much like what you get in Daggerheart, where players can accumulate drama, and then storytellers can use it to fuck with them. This is for new storytellers. This is for new GMs. It's a way to show with a physical thing in front of you, oh look, I have a bunch of beads, and this bunch of beads means that I should probably do something to screw with the characters. And thing is, it's not a mechanic for me, because I know when to screw with characters or not. So I can't say if I hate it or not, because I just know that it's not something for me. I don't need to spend drama to make things hard for players, right? Like, the game doesn't tell me that I'm not allowed to change difficulties when I want to. There are certain ways to spend drama that I get it. You know, like let's see. Drama. So I can spend drama to change the scene. So like now it's raining. And because it's raining, following somebody has a 2-die penalty, but you get a 2-die bonus to hide or go unnoticed. Yeah, but I can just do that. I can just do that. Increase the stakes. I can add a complication. Yeah, but I just do that. Spending 5 drama to threaten the masquerade. Okay, well now we're getting somewhere. It means that if the players do enough to fuck up, well then now I can kind of be like, hey, I got 5 drama sitting here now. There, I've just done it. Theo Bell's now coming after you. So again, I could just do that, but like there, I can understand that might be interesting. NPC empowerment. So here are some things that I think are somewhat interesting. I just don't know if I would need it. You can spend drama to have an NPC escape. So they survive when they would otherwise die. Okay. Means that players accumulated enough bad karma or whatever that then they're not able to outright kill somebody. That can be interesting. You know, like I can see how a newbie storyteller might be like, well, I don't want them to kill the big bad right away, so I can just get them to flee. That makes some sense. I can spend drama to activate an NPC at the end of one character's turn and before the start of the next, so I can make them act twice in a round. These ones I sort of like, especially because sometimes you want to have a party go up against one bad guy, and I want that one bad guy to feel threatening, and so that bad guy needs to be able to act more than once. This is why celerity is so dangerous, because being able to act more than once is a very, very powerful tool, but it's a tool that I like to use sometimes if you're like, yep, you're all attacking the massive Gorgon Hydra fucking thing that you're up against. And so it's not just, oh, once a round I'm gonna smack somebody really hard. It's more like, yeah, I'll attack you and I'll attack you because I'm just that cool. So I get kind of making that. I can use it to recharge abilities. Okay. I can regain health or willpower. Sure. So I can see using drama in this way, but then it also has things like story triggers. I can spend drama in order to give PCs omens. Like, I don't need the excuse. That's because I want the control over the story for me. Some people were saying, oh no, we're taking the control out of the storyteller's hands, but in fact, I don't think they are. I think instead what they're doing is they're introducing drama as a resource in order to encourage storytellers who are more passive to do something with the metacurrency that they've been given, which might be a really cool thing to do. And because the language hasn't made it explicitly clear that I'm not allowed to do these things if I don't want to, or sorry, I'm not allowed to do these things if I don't have the drama for it, they don't say that. So I don't know if I mind that much, but it is something that I have to track that I'm just like, I don't know if I care. And Flower of August, I think you are correct. I hope that it is a new storyteller crutch and not we have to protect the player from bad storytellers. That's kind of what I was getting to this, right? Like, I could have an NPC escape just because I want to. Like, I can engineer that. It feels bad if I do it over and over and over again. So for a new storyteller, it might be useful to say, yeah, you can do it, but only if you've saved up enough drama. I just want to be able to control the pacing a bit more. This is, in my opinion, a crutch and not a tool. So I don't think I mind it as long as it remains unnecessary. Or as long as it remains necessary only in certain very specific contexts, like this is my excuse to have this character act multiple times in a round because you've got drama. Because drama is something that also the storyteller accumulates in one of three ways. You get drama at the beginning of each session. You get 1 drama per player character. Okay. You get that when players choose that option on a choose your pain trigger. So we're going to get to that. But this means that players can choose to give you drama. And if you don't make use of drama, or if you don't care about drama, then that all of a sudden takes that option that players have and either says, well, it's a free option for you to take because I'm never going to spend this anyway, or it's a useless option because I don't care about how much drama I have, or now it's a very weak thing because the instant that you give me drama, I'm just going to make your life hell. So it is an optional it is an optional way to use this, and as long as it's optional, I'm sort of fine with it. And then the last way to do it is from unique effects, player powers, other types of test failures, or optional rules. So essentially, you earn drama whenever the fuck you want. So in that way, I'm a little bit like, okay. It also says, whether you choose to reveal how much drama you have is up to you, but we encourage storytellers to keep your drama visible. Yeah, I don't think that this should even be a question. If you're going to use the drama system, players should know how much drama you have. Otherwise, if a storyteller just wants to lie about how much drama they have, then congratulations, you're a storyteller for every other game where you get to just make choices. So, KFF, you know what? That's not a bad idea. Hey, I ended the session with 9 drama. You owe me dinner. Okay, so testing. I'm going to go back to this for a second. Because when you're testing, you have, and after testing, we're going to get to life paths and clan traits. So when you test, there are ways to mess with these things. So if you fail a test, that means that you've rolled no 1s and no successes. You failed to accomplish what you wanted. There's also painful failures, which the common parlance is botch. It means on top of the normal consequences of the failure, you must also choose your pain. At the storyteller's discretion, you can forgo choose your pain and suffer some other major consequence or change in your situation instead. So what they're saying is, you can just have it be a botch, just like it has been in other games, where the storyteller just says, this is what awful thing happens to you, or you can choose your pain. And then there's Devil's Bargain, which they've codified in here. If you roll a failure, but you really want to succeed, you can propose a Devil's Bargain with the storyteller, which I can reject if I spend a drama. I don't like that. I think that I should always be allowed to reject something, but let me put it another way. I think I should always be allowed to reject an unreasonable bargain. But I get it if you're like, I can spend a drama in order to be like, no, you failed, point finale. But to make a devil's bargain, the player proposes a complication, and then the storyteller and the other players can make a case for a different or modified complication. I'd rather that they just put it this way. The devil's bargain is somebody proposes a complication, and then the storyteller decides if that's the complication that comes out. Storyteller can suggest it themselves or the player. I don't like the fact that it implies that the player has to suggest the complication first, because I don't think that that's necessary. I think that if the player wants to, they can. But it's something that I think a lot of players, especially my players, hesitate with. They don't want the narrative control. They want to focus on their characters. They want to focus on playing through the story. And when you say that, like, okay, well, maybe it actually happens this way instead, if they have a great idea, I want them to bring it up. But if they don't have a great idea, I don't want them to panic thinking that they have to come up with one on them, for themselves. So there's that. Blood Artist. I think Hunger Dice was the best invention since forever, since it added unpredictability into vampires' fights with their beasts in a very elegant way. See, I like Hunger Dice. I'm just saying that a bunch of people hated it, and now they love it. So taking it away, I admit, can feel bad, but that doesn't mean that this system is bad. It means that it's different. And who knows, in 5 years, you might be arguing that this system is the best. It's hard to tell, because also the vast majority of people who are complaining about this are doing so without actually having sat down and played it. So, KFF, my health pool and my fun power pool should not be the same thing. I don't know if I fully agree, but I definitely agree that if you give somebody fun powers, you want them to be able to use them, and you don't want them to feel like they shouldn't. But we also had the same complaints with Rage Economy, and we ended up doing just fine with that in Werewolf 5th. The thing is, rules for the players to get leverage over the GM is very much we're trying to take the responsibility away from storytellers to make it easier for them. Even though you're now giving players ways to overrule you, what it's essentially saying is you don't have to worry, players will get a chance to fix things. We have rules in place to protect you as the storyteller. Because one of the biggest stumbling blocks, aside from the universal curse of scheduling, is nobody wants to be the one who runs the game. So there's that. So when you suggest something, if it's patently wrong, so just let the storyteller tell me their vision, that might mean you have a shitty storyteller. But it's also difficult sometimes, Kate, if you aren't as familiar with the setting, then sometimes you might be able to say things like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the door locked? And I'd be like, the person who's chasing you isn't going to bother unlocking the door. They're just going to rip it off its hinges. So you might not be as aware of oh, I didn't realize that they were that strong, or oh, I didn't realize that locks in this universe basically mean fucking nothing. It's the kind of thing that if a player just isn't used to the setting as much, and then saying, well, no, you have to figure this out, it can be very panic inducing for them, because now they're like, well, now I have to be an expert in the setting, and maybe I don't want to. What if I get it wrong? I don't want people to get it wrong. So weirdness, when I was screwing around with Changeling and trying to see what I would do in terms of house ruling of 5th, that was one of the things that I was working with. The idea that that glamour was something that, as you used it, it just, it was a risk to use. I ended up not going with it. Of course, I ended up not going with anything, but yes, torpor is still a thing in this, Aragon. Now, I like Devil's Bargains, so I'm glad that they put this in here. I do think that it's interesting. It's especially interesting if you're like, man, I really wish that they succeeded on that role as a storyteller. Now you can kind of be like, no, don't worry, we can make you succeed, but we have ways to make things a little trickier for you. I think that's great. Choosing your pain. So if you botch, if you have a painful failure, there's other ways in which choosing your pain might come up. You pick one of the following: lose 3 vitae or willpower, your choice. Lose all your quickening, and you can't choose this if you have 0 quickening. Mark off 1 box on your beast tracker, or give a drama to the storyteller. I don't like this. I don't. Because it means that now players can gamify this. They can min-max their botches. They can choose, oh, well, I only have 1 quickening. I don't mind losing 1 quickening. There you go. Versus, oh, I have 20 quickening. Well, I don't want to lose 20 quickening, so I won't pick that option. Well, botch isn't supposed to feel good. It's supposed to, make you... It's not even supposed to make you feel bad. A botch is supposed to make things complicated. It's supposed to make things like, well, it's not even just a failure, it's something else beyond. And I don't like the fact that here you get to pick. Oh, well, I don't have a lot of boxes filled out on my beast tracker, so I'll fill one of those out. Give a drama to the storyteller. Ah, my storyteller doesn't use drama anyway. Fuck it. So I would much rather just be like, you know what? Just collaborate. Just figure that out. Yeah, Devil's Bargains are being presented as something new. They're not, but like they're codified now, which I sort of appreciate. Yeah. But like I appreciate the fact that they're trying to do something here, but this is a case in which I don't want to give the players control because they're presenting it as the illusion of narrative control. Oh, I want my character to become so frustrated that the beast burns blood inside them so that they lose it. No, they're not going to think of it that way. They're going to look at their sheet and say, what can I afford to lose? That's not giving them narrative control. That's giving them systems control. That's video game stuff. Video game stuff is fun, but it's not what I would prefer here. So I don't like this. And if I was playing this, I would probably just be like, choose your pain is something that honestly, you have to negotiate with me whether or not I'm going to allow that, because otherwise I'm just going to complicate things in another way. I do like the fact that trying again means that you have to change the attribute or the skill that you've used, so you're not just rolling the same pool again with a higher difficulty. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because it's, if I'm just like, okay, well, I want to break down this door, so I'll spend my strength and my athletics, and you roll it and you fail, then it's kind of assumed that like, okay, well, I'll try again. Okay, I'd rather that you be like, okay, well, now how do you get past the door? And they're like, well, I'm going to use my intelligence athletics, because now I'm going to specifically attack a weak point in the door. Well, intelligence wasn't your best pool to begin with, but now at least it makes more sense that you're trying something different. So I like that. I like that as a specific thing. You have to choose a different approach, and the difficulty goes up. But remember, failure is not something that you have to accept. You can always try to make a devil's bargain if you want to, right? And apparently it says you can only propose a devil's bargain once per scene. Okay, I guess so, but kind of fine maybe with that limit. All right, we're running a bit out of time. So I'm going to move on to another big area of concern, which are clan traits, life paths, and disciplines. So, life paths. During your character creation, you get to choose a life path. It is something that, and your sire. So you choose your sire, your generation. So you can choose the sire, and the sire lets you pick a different kind of discipline. So maybe you had a manipulative sire, so you get to choose something from dominate, potence, or presence. Maybe you had a caring sire, so that you get fortitude, potence, or presence. Maybe you had an adoptive sire, so you get to pick a discipline from another clan. This is essentially giving players the chance to further kit out their vampire by saying, yeah, you're not limited to just the 3 disciplines that your clan gives you right at the start. Ultimately, I think that this might be giving players a little bit too much freedom. I think that there is some joy in operating within a creative constraint, but I'm not like super against them. Flaws do exist, Blood Artist. The clan flaws still exist. They still exist. But there aren't like flaws like merits and flaws. I'm not sure that I mind that, because specifically flaws often, as presented in books, were just ways to min-max systems. I'd rather that players just have flaws. And I know that experience kind of says like, hey, if one of your flaws comes up in the context of the game, you'll get an experience point. I kind of wonder if that's a better way of doing it, because then people have a reason to have their flaws come up, as long as it's not annoying. We'll get into that in a bit. I'm not super thrilled with the sire stuff because I just sort of find it, like right now I'm not super thrilled with it because, oh, I had a manipulative sire, so therefore somehow I developed dominate, potence, or presence. I don't know. It's not great, but whatever. Life paths. Oh, in terms of generation, by the way, so
generation in this game, now you have a generation modifier depending on it, so that all neonates have a generation modifier of 1, Ancile 2, Elders 3, Methuselah 4. I get it, and considering how important generation modifiers are in the game, because they come up a lot, I'm a little worried that it's a little too samesies, because it just sort of feels like I start the game as a neonate and my generation modifier is going to be 1, and it will always be 1. It will never get better. Short of committing Diablerie. And I'm not even sure that Diablerie, I forget if Diablerie has a way to modify your generation unless it drops you to a lower gen. So, if you never knew your sire, then that is a unknown sire, and you get Celerity, Fortitude, or Potence. So life paths are ways to say, like, as an mortal, this is what I did. As a vampire, this is what I did. So, like, were you a criminal? Were you a hunter? Were you an artist? It's fine. It's a way to... what essentially this does is it bullies the player into making sure that they can't min-max everything, right? That they're saying, like, look, the reason why you have some of these skills is because of something that happened in your past. I think life paths are great if they're optional, is what it comes down to. I think that you should be able to do away with it. I was going to mention Diablerie. There is something in here that I believe is a shame, and I think that they'll probably maybe change it back. This is, like, I'm not optimistic that they're going to change a whole ton of things. Optimistic's the wrong word, because I don't think they should change tons of things. I think they should feel secure in their design, and if it really doesn't pan out, then that's something that they have to fix. But I don't like the fact that Diablerie can lower your generation no matter who you suck. I think that's weird, because I think that there's going to be people out there who will try to game that system. There also isn't enough evidence in the play package, which, to be fair, it's a player package, that Diablerie is like a crime that absolutely, like, if other vampires figure out that you're doing it, they'll fucking kill you. I think that needs to have a little bit of emphasis put on it. Yeah, Diablerie shouldn't be the world's craziest blowjob. I agree. Yeah. So life paths I think are great for people who need them. Like, I'm thoroughly thrilled with them being in there, because coming up with characters isn't something that everybody likes to do. So, yeah, Flower of August, that's the thing, right? Like, there's ways to min-max it where you can just say, like, great, I will embrace a vamp, I will embrace some mortal, and then I'm going to Diablerize them. And if I do that enough, eventually my generation's going to drop. Like, it feels weird. The thing is, if generation is something that's important, if the game is saying you have to commit a horrific act in order to get a better gen, which is such a powerful thing for you, I think that's kind of a cool thing to do. But you take a little bit away from it when you're like, I could literally just find some rando, like, 15th gen KTIF weak ass vampire and then suck them dry, and this person can have been a vampire for 2 weeks, and now all of a sudden my generation goes down. I don't like that. So that's one of the things that I would fix, that I would do. Clan traits. So sharp people will have noticed that in this version of the game, the clans that are available in the playtest package are the Brujah, Gangrel, La Sombra, Ministry, Nosferatu, Toreador, and Ventrue. So, notably, Malkavians are not on the list. And I think it's because they're going to do something to Malkavians that is overdue. Malkavians, of course, being traditionally Camarilla vampires. And Malkavians are described in this book if I go to the clans. With their unique minds that can see beyond reality, these vampires are unified in an otherworldly network that allows them to share knowledge and visions. I think that they're going to pull Malkavians away from being insane. They've already started. But I think that them being, you know, a bit more occult, a bit more unified in minds so that they like act a bit strange, I think that's great. But I think that it's time. Yes, that was. But like, I'm glad that they're keeping that. But I think that the reason that it's not in here is because they're also trying to figure out how to make that even more obvious. Because people play Malks all the time because they're nuts, because they're lunatics, because they're wacky. And I'm glad that that's not there. Yes. Demontation was a discipline that never should have existed, so that's great. But and if they go Stargazers with Malks, I'm also fine with that. And I say this as somebody who my first PC was a Malk, because when I finally joined the LARP as a player, I was like, which of the clans is not as represented, and then I picked that one. And then I ended up really liking playing that Malk. But it's Malkavians continue to be questionable because it asks a lot of players if you're like, all Malkavians are X, how do you interpret X is difficult. Either way. Clan traits. So these are clan traits that you will find in here that will do things based on your disciplines that are only available to members of your clan, such as Brujah having the prowess clan trait, which says when you hit with an unarmed attack or a light melee weapon attack, you add your dots and potence to the damage you deal. And that's something that only Brujah get to have. Others can't get it. They can still buy potence, and they can still get all the stuff in potence, but they can't have this. And Blood Artist, see, that's where I agree. I think that playing a character who is of a different mental state is very interesting. I just think that if you put it in the core book and you just say bluntly, hey, they're all nuts, that's when you get problems, because some people take this as a license to do something that kind of runs counter to the game, or it's just incredibly like gross from just a like, this is what you think mental illness is kind of appearances. So Eremethios, it's when all Malkavians are insane is the thing that I don't like, because I think that sanity is something that is like, this is the same thing that I have a problem with Call of Cthulhu. I don't like sanity as a game mechanic, because I think sanity is something that takes a bit more nuance, because there's also things like, all right, I will put this forward as an example from my own past. I really want to make sure that I'm going to make this clear that it's a tricky situation no matter what. Later in my LARPing career, I never ran Vampire. I only ever played, which is a rarity. All the other games I ran. This one I played in, and there was somebody who wanted to become a Malkavian, and the way that they described their derangement, because they all had derangements, was, I'm autistic. And I think that's gross. Straight up. I've had people say I want to play schizophrenic when there is a player who is legitimately schizophrenic sitting right over there. And of course, when they say schizophrenic, what they actually mean is multiple personality disorder, but they call it schizophrenia because that's what they heard. It's the same thing by people saying like, oh, I'm totally OCD, not realizing that OCD is a debilitating condition. And it doesn't really have to do with the fact that you just like to be tidy. So that's the thing about presentation. As you've said here, Blood Artist, if Malkavians they see the world in a different way, they react to the world in a different way, I am so down. And that's what they were doing in V5, and I'm hoping that that's what they continue with here. I'm just tired of them being the kooky clan. Traits. I'd have to play these, but I don't know if I mind the traits as much. I don't think that it makes players pick a class. Like, I don't really feel that the traits are so overpowered that you're like, well, if you want to be anybody who's good at combat, you have to play a Brujah, because otherwise you don't have access to prowess or wrestler, and so therefore you're out. I think that at the same time, some of these things just might not matter that much. So the clan traits are the things that they're a big question mark for me in my head. I'm a big shrug. I just don't know if I like them or not. Because they might work and they might not. I don't think that it makes them into classes, but I do think that there's a certain amount of, like, if you have potence and you want to do more damage because you hit hard, doesn't that sort of match what potence does? Like, that's where I'm kind of worried about that. I'll also point out that in terms of the disciplines themselves, so disciplines, I like the fact that there's 1 dot powers, 2 dot powers, and 3 dot powers, but the powers can get stronger based on the number of dots you have in a discipline. If you have to test, then it tests the number of dots you have in the discipline. I like the fact that disciplines can mature. So, for instance, if you have telepathy, once you have more than 2 dots in the discipline, you can use the power in new ways. So if you have 4 dots in Auspex, now you can project and detect more complex thoughts and phrases. If you have 6 dots, you can create a network of telepathic communication amongst yourself and a number of willing targets. I think that's fun. I think that's cool. All of that makes some sense to me. I still think that celerity has some problems. For one, I think vibrating hands is a fucking dumb discipline, if I might allow myself a little hyperbole. I don't like the fact that it's like, yeah, I have celerity, I have 1 dot in celerity, and so I can shatter things by moving things that fast. That feels to me like that's potence. I'm big and strong and I can smash things, and not I can move really fast so I can shatter things. It just does, it feels like it's infringing upon other things. And also, I don't like the fact that Fighter's Alacrity exists so that you can act twice as often as anyone else in a turn. It also doesn't make sure that it says specifically that this is a combat thing, so you could potentially act twice in one turn in a social combat as well, which is weird. So, not a huge fan of those. The more that I think about clan traits, the more I'm kind of like, the more I'm a little worried, to be honest. I could see it being the kind of thing that, like, hey, if you're a Brujah, you can buy this clan trait for 1 less experience point, because it's something that's just, it's more known among Brujah. But I feel like if you meet the prerequisites of other disciplines, it feels that. Yeah, I would rather that, you know? It's just, when I look at clan traits, some of them also feel like, why isn't this just a thing that they can do anyway? So there's some of that there, but I think that's one of the things that they're looking into. That's one of the focuses of the playtest. Either way, we've been going for a bit, and I gotta eat because I have a hot date in 30 minutes with 5 other people, and I'm looking forward to that. So a bunch of thoughts thrown out here. Let's throw it down. I think that a lot of the complaints that are being levied at this are knee-jerk reactions. I think that this is worth playing. I don't think it's perfect, and I think that it is stretching more towards new players than it is towards old players, and I think we have to get used to that. And I say this as somebody who would prefer that they cater to me, but they don't. Yeah, we didn't even get to humanity. Well, we can do another one of these. Look, we can do more clinic hours on this. Like, absolutely. There's just a lot to cover, and I only had 2 hours. But it also seems like people are interested in this, so we will definitely come back. I would say that you should play this if you want to see how it feels. There's a bunch of things in here that I see and I'm like, man, I think that would be great. But also remember that I play games that are on stream, and on stream that there's different things, and reducing complexity can often be a great boon to streamers. So there is that there. But in case you didn't catch it from the beginning, I don't like the fact that it seems like a bunch of the great ideas from V5 are being tossed, meta-wise and rules-wise. It feels like a bit of a J.J. Abrams coming in and being like, no, fuck you, I want things the way they were. So, we'll see. Either way, tomorrow, you can go and catch Double O Punch. It's over on twitch.tv/Elizabeth A. Neal. That is happening. I think that's been confirmed. And weekend, I believe those streams may still be on as well. But Sunday, we will be playing more Datafall, our 3rd edition Exalted Cyberpunk Shard game. Because why not? We're interested in knowing how you think and how you feel. We also recognize that it's the summer, so sometimes it's easier or harder to do things because you aren't just cozying up at home. Well, summer for many of us, not summer for all of us. But either way, thank you for participating. Let's take a look at the people who have made this possible. Your support has been absolutely appreciated. And if you have other questions or other thoughts about this, the Discord's a great place to do that. We're going to start filtering the conversation into Fluff and to Crunch, because I think that that's where those belong. I'm not panicking over this. I'm not panicking over it. As you can tell, that there's certain things that I will get passionate about, like fucking feeding. But I think that this is worth playing. And I think that a lot of the things that this is doing is change. And change is sometimes difficult, but it is not always impossible. And it is often for the good. So, if you also have other topics for I Would Be Dead Calm. Exactly, KFF, right? Like, I think that's what people recognize. If I was panicking, I would just be sitting here and just breathing. If you have other topics that you want to discuss on Clinic Hours, you can just throw that into the Discord as well. We would really appreciate that. And in the meantime, I know that it's sometimes the hardest thing to do. But if you have a problem in your game, it's not the easiest thing to do, but it can be the most effective, which is to use your word hole. We'll see you next time.